Welcome. It's good to see you. Today I want to talk about or continue the conversation, kind of wrap it up a little bit, that we've been having about leadership. And that conversation has been cast in terms of church-based leadership and kingdom-based leadership. They are not necessarily the same kinds of things. So I'm just going to mention several areas that I hope will be helpful in thinking in terms of what it means for us to think in terms of kingdom-based leadership. One of the areas that I want to mention in reference to this is the difference between management and leadership. In churches, we often talk about church leaders, but more often than not, what we're really talking about is church managers. Here's the fundamental difference between management and leadership. When you have an organization or an entity or an institution, management usually deals with all of the issues within that institution or organization. And those issues could, range from employment to production to relationships to what the financial outlay is, to investment, to profit, to branding, to all of those things. And companies and entities, institutions will oftentimes have layers of management within them to help that company or institution to achieve maximum result. Leadership, on the other hand, asks different questions and stands at a different place, whereas management focuses to the inward functioning of an organization. Leadership looks at a different aspect. It asks different questions. Some of those are the fundamental root questions like, why do we even exist? What is our purpose? How do we adapt to, or how do we respond to the changes in culture and in our world? Where are we moving to be able to move forward? What ways are we going to have to rethink who we are? So you can see that there's a fundamental difference between management issues and leadership issues. In churches, the very, very high percentage of church leaders are really asking management questions. How do we get more people? How do we run this program better? What curriculum are we going to use? Who should we hire for this? What is our income? Where are we going to budget our monies, and so forth? And those things have got to be done for sure. But the confusion is that in churches, we tend to think that all of the issues and conversations that happen within the organization are the leadership ones. And oftentimes, no one is really doing the leadership stuff. That is the challenge of addressing these fundamental issues and questions about the nature of our existence, the reason why we are here, the purpose of what we're doing, the changing culture, and what does the future look like, and how do we navigate that. Those are the leadership issues. And in our conversations about leadership, we've been talking about moving from church-based leadership to kingdom-based leadership. And perhaps it's a little more clear that what we're talking about is not just how do we manage churches in a healthy way, but how do we actually do leadership in terms of the kinds of questions that I've just presented to you. How do we best pursue those issues? Who's talking about those kinds of questions? And I'm suggesting to us as a church family that we be able to do both. The great majority of most of our church conversation in all churches, most of the church conversation is within the church, is intra-church. Most of the things that people are interested in, most of the things that we count, most of the things that we tend to value are within the context of the church itself. Leaders are those who begin to ask different questions, begin to challenge, and one of the big reasons that most churches focus on management without really giving the kind of time, energy, and resources to leadership is because management is often more secure, or it offers a security that you don't often find in leadership. In management, because we're trying to do things right, the appropriate means, the appropriate process, the appropriate people, and all of those, there's a sense of order, there's a sense of rhythm, there's a sense of predictability. And when all of those things come together in a healthy way, there's a sense of security. In leadership, you have to challenge those. And I'm not saying you need one and not the other, just simply saying they both have to exist. But the leadership vision is different than the management vision. It's a different set of skills, often different ways that we see things. And so leading from a kingdom perspective can be challenging to a church that is rooted in institutionalism or traditionalism. And this is not so much a right or wrong, it's just a way of expressing that we need to be able to embrace both. But in most churches, I can tell you why most pastors don't want to really do leadership. It is because of lack of job security. When you do the kind of leadership, or you do it in the way that we've been describing it here, pastors feel at risk. They're going to be more highly criticized. And so it is really provides more security, not only for the church, but for pastor or staff people, if the conversation is really about how do we manage this well. But at Ivy, we want to be able to hold out both hands and in fact say, okay, how do we manage this? And with the other, how do we at the same time lead? And I'm very grateful that we have people who are kind of designed and have passions and interest in each of the area. We have a number of people really good at dealing with the management kinds of issues that need to be dealt with. And typically most institutions and organizations will have a fewer number of people who are good at asking the fundamental questions of who and why and where. But you need, there's a need for fewer people actually to ask those questions. But in dealing with those questions, everybody can be involved. So it's not as if it's necessary for every single person in a church to be asking those questions, but it is necessary for every person to be embraced in that conversation, to be a part of that. So, I just really looking forward to creating more of a culture. I think we've made some good steps and good headway in doing that, creating more of a culture in which we not only do the management things, but we do the leadership things. And probably the most significant thing about the leadership path is that you're actually talking about leading a movement. And it is less defined than an organization. It's less defined than something that, for example, is like a car, is very mechanical, and if something goes wrong, you can go in and look at various parts, or you can test the engine, or you can test the battery or various liquid levels, and ultimately, figure out what's wrong with it. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to ask questions like, how can we reimagine or rethink the whole purpose of a car, and what happens? So we don't need everybody out there rethinking the purpose of a car, but when that conversation is productive and a new kind of car is produced, it does impact everybody. So that's kind of the relationship and delicate balance that often happens between management and leadership, and often needs to happen more so in churches. This involves paradigm shifting. Paradigm's been a word now that's been very popular for, at least 3 decades. Paradigm just simply means the way that we see things, the perspective from which we see things. We all see things, even if we're standing at the same place at the same time, we all see things in a perspective that is unique to us. Even if we're witnessing the same event, we will see things about that that others will not see, and will miss things that others see clearly, and when they point it out to us, we wonder how in the world did we miss seeing that. Paradigm is the way that we see things. And when it comes to churches, most of us have a church paradigm way of seeing the church. And in order for churches to shift from church-based thinking to kingdom-based thinking, fundamentally it's going to be a shift in paradigms. And there are a number that I could list that I myself have had to go through paradigm shifts in the course of my own ministry. When I think back of how I thought of church before I went to seminary, then thought about it as my understanding evolved through seminary, and then go back to the first church I pastored, and what I thought about church when I went into that, and what I thought the expectations of a pastor were, and how I saw church or measured success. There has been, over the course of ministry years, just quite an evolution of things that I see differently now than the way that I saw them 25, 30 years ago. So I'll just give you a really quick list of some of those things, and none of these are going to be new to you, the things we've been talking about all along. One I've already been talking about today. Big paradigm shift for me has been how to think in terms of church culture and then shift to thinking in terms of kingdom culture. Another paradigm shift has been the shift from thinking of churches in terms of being driven by a program to what it looks like when churches are driven by a redemptive mission. Another big shift has been the way that I view church when I see it through the lens of the institution, or when I see it through the lens of a movement of God, or I see it more incarnationally. Those are just three at the top of a list, and they could go on. And I know you've had a long life's way, your own paradigm shifts, but I've really come to enjoy moments or seasons in life in which God's Spirit is working, and when I sense that there's a paradigm shift coming, to me it's kind of an exciting thing. It's a challenging thing, and there are fears that come along with that, because there are going to be things that we see in a different way, things that we've been looking at for a very long time. And when we reimagine or re-envision those things, it can be startling and surprising. At the same time, I'd love the adventure of what happens when a paradigm shift is taking place. This is in fact what happened all throughout the life and ministry of Jesus. He was a tremendous paradigm shift to the religious and institutional culture of his day. He just saw things so very differently than the religious leaders did, and it cost him. So paradigm shifting comes, for those who enjoy it, it comes with a measure of excitement and a measure of, man, what is the future going to look like, or what is it going to taste like, what it is going to look like, but all that comes with a price. The primary reason most churches can't successfully engage in paradigm shifts is because of the fears that go along with them, and the price you're going to pay. And it's just easier to keep people in all of the routines known for a long time, doing all the things we've done for a long time. And quite honestly, and I'm in these conversations obviously with pastors all the time, a lot of times it's just pastoral survival. How can I keep more people happy than are frustrated or angry or mad? And when you get into pastoral survival mode, it's a really tough place to be in, because what you're really doing is trying to pull all the levers that make more people happy than not. When you're in paradigm shifting mode, you have to sacrifice, or you have to, to some degree, put aside the innate need to want to please people or make people happy. And you just have to trust that when God's Spirit is leading to a new place, or God's Spirit is leading to a new way of thinking about church, or a new way of doing things, or to a place that a particular church hasn't been before, then God Himself is the one who will bring the fulfillment. I know throughout my ministry years, when, been a lot of times temptations, some of which you've given into along the way, in which you just do things to try to minimize the criticism. And but being a leader means that you're going to be willing to lead where the Spirit leads, and the value of your leadership is not based upon how many people will vote for you or think you're heading in the right direction or doing the right thing. It's how faithful are we being to God? How faithful are we being to the deep burn of our calling? At what risk will we do things for Christ's sake? If that means leading somewhere or articulating something that might not be widely popular. So, leading from a kingdom perspective is a different thing than managing the church. And finally, just want to talk about some of the skills that we all need to develop when we are leading or when we're in leadership mode. Some of these skills might be newer skills for you, but one of them is coaching people. Coaching is helping people to grow, to develop into how they are designed and how God has put them together. And sometimes in churches, we've become so routine in the way that we manage them that in some cases we have not given the kind of attention that we probably should have to how do we help people to mature, how do we help people to grow spiritually, how do we better help develop people in their faith. So one of the things that will be an essential tool will be more people who are coaching. And some of you might have a deep passion for that and might be very gifted at coaching other people. And your service to Christ is going to be so valued in moving forward as a kingdom-led church. We're going to need coaches in our congregation. Another area will be that of storytelling. Some years ago, I was really amazed when I heard, I was listening to a futurist kind of talk about what were going to be the most valuable jobs in the future, and this was probably 12, 15 or so years ago. And I myself would have never imagined it, but the futurist, and don't think of terms of wacky, foretellers and all that kind of stuff. These are people just studying trends in human nature, life, and contour, and very, very, very sharp person. This person suggested that storytelling was going to be, at some point in time, the most significant thing in culture. And I probably kind of dismissed it like, yeah, really, that's not going to happen. Well, look, here we are. I can hardly believe it myself. The power of storytelling, the power of being able to understand what the story is really about, the power to be able to embrace it, the power to be able to articulate story. And here we are in the midst of a culture that is seeking to do just that, to tell stories, to articulate those stories. And all of that really helped me to reframe the way that I see the Bible. And when I took a couple of steps back and realized that this is exactly what the Bible is, it is the story of the redemptive mission of God through Jesus Christ, empowered by the Holy Spirit. as simple as that sounds, when I was able to see the entire Bible as a grand story of God, it really enlivened and excited my approach in my reading and my teaching. I hope it comes through somehow in preaching, but it really helped change the way that I engage the Bible. Other skills that are going to be needed in leadership will be those of you who have skills in conflict management. Whenever you lead, whenever an institution, organization is being challenged to go to where it wouldn't go on its own, to hear new ideas, to consider things that might seem at first foreign, we're going to need the skills of individuals who understand what is happening when relationships are in conflict, and can help guide us into healthy conflict and resolution. And sometimes conflict can be just what is needed. It helps us to hear people that we otherwise would not hear, to understand things that we might have tuned out, and we need people who can help manage the conflict so that the conflict produces healthy fruit and actually draws people together and helps relationships come together. We need people who understand what it is like to lead things through a transition, who know how to lead through a storm, who know how to lead when the sun is setting and the clouds are gathering and the winds are blowing and the seas are choppy. There are people who are designed to do that, and we need people who can lead in those times. Need people with listening skills. I mean, one of the most underrated and undervalued things is the ability to listen to people. And oftentimes people with great listening skills go under the radar because they're not valued as people who are contributing significantly to what's going on. Well, the truth is, those of you with listening skills have the capacity to make some of the very best contributions to us as a church family. We need to celebrate other people's stories. When we know God is doing something, how do we get that story up front of everybody? How do we celebrate that together? And we need to be able to not only read, understand, and interpret the Bible, we need to read, understand, and interpret culture. And this is a place where churches are usually fairly weak. We're far more comfortable interpreting the Bible than we are interpreting the culture that is around us. So I hope some of these things are encouraging to you, and some of these things will take us to a place where, as we talk about leadership, and as we move from church-based leadership to kingdom-based leadership, this becomes a way that we can get our hands around that conversation. So thank you for the pleasure of having some moments with you, and I can hardly wait until the kinds of things we are sharing become part of our face-to-face live conversations. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day. Thank you.